As many people understand by now, the Seattle Green Party, under false pretenses through a group called Outwas, lured me to Seattle so they could say, "Get off my turf." Now, they're being run by Europeans who are old hands at watching actors in their plays. And they take a great deal of recreational sadism out of watching someone who they have given the ultimatum. If you want mercy from us, as an innocent bystander to their Holocaustal hate crimes, you have to play along with us. And they have incrementally devoured the tolerance levels. Their original scheme was to pit a person who deliberately became infected with AIDS as an accuser on the blood panel chart of someone who they despised, an American with connections to the Eisenhower administration. And this was part of their battle for position. They said dignity depends on your willingness to die at the hands of a criminal psychotic being led by their shamanistic guru Ringo Starr and Yoko Ono. Intellectualizing the criminally insane took place for decades under the regime of the dialectical UWists. And what they did to me after torturing me into a neuroplasm was say, "Mock yourself, queerbait. Make us laugh. Show us that you are just a joke, just a pawn, and maybe we will let you live a little longer," sort of like shooting around my feet. And they were throwing darts at my feet as a hostage child, literally. And in return for any kind of so-called peership, they swooped down with this poacher's guild from pawn shops. The truth is very clear, however, that they've been working with Warhol on child pornography in the black markets for a long time, particularly with respect to me, who they held hostage when I was incapable of knowing what was going on because I was a child, because I was in trauma, and because they had knocked me out with gas and a nerve agent. And they deny all this. They lie about this. These so-called peers are people who leave riddles while coping with trauma through pure madness and hate crime. It's as sinister as it comes. They're so-called professionals eaching into the professional, rival centers and poison a deaf person in trauma in the mouth and write in their gibberish, those who understand will be freed and those who don't will be poisoned in the mouth. And this Roberto has a strange mouth. He's almost Willie Storage or the closest continuer. And one of them drew that. I mean, he's a good drawer. So they poisoned me in the heart, too, right before they ripper murdered Shannon harps. It came in a tube big enough for my bagel knife from the Postal Union. And it was Washington Board of Health Investigation 2007-04-0076RN. And that was before I knew they had done it to chemically castrate me. Okay, it was a heart emergency at the time. So, what we see in Poacher Island, on Mount Desert Island, is the Rockefeller, Teddy Rockefeller, and Swarthmore engaging in morbid antics around one of their classmates who acted as their agent provocateur. Her name was Leslie Katz, but they brought in the black man because I was the white man. My father was an outsider from the lesser war of World War II, not an important person who became overly puffed up white liberal at the University of Pittsburgh. And, this top dollar involved in And so they come out and they say that it wouldn't have happened, that I've been tortured if I hadn't a never-nosed Vince Irini. And one of the salesmen was a kid from Wells Fargo named Martin Alderman, who was really well liked by Fulham. Get that name, Fulham, a black man. Fulham. Also, it's the Fulham Palace Cafe where King Crimson puppet danced everybody from. Fulham was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a gym teacher who called me a queer. And none of the guys ever stood up for me about that. You know, none of the people in political correctness ever stood up for me when the scriptwriter called me a goy and took the IRE out of the word squirrel, misspelled it SQURL, or used my name as a symbol of who was to be exterminated. Meanwhile, I wanted to point out that Trump was in school with Francis Ford Coppola while a lot of this was going on. So they put on the cover of their newspaper, "You're going to eat that," you know, and have pictures of like Mark Chapman, you know, all covered in the face with icky stuff that's supposed to remind you of Leslie Katz's form of provocation. You know, because they're going to send you ESP signals, and you're going to remember that Jaime Carbonell and Aaron Dixon have their carrot tape. That's a real good, you know, wallop and blackmail for somebody who's on the run from 7-foot tall black killers, from threaten to killers anyway, from Sugar Bear Funeral Parlor. And of course, the pornographers have the conscience of Weezo. Weezo is the last temptation crusade. So kneel before Colin. And you will howl, incredibly barking boyfriend. The joke's on you, the union puts up at the school. Now, so what they're opting for is the survival of the intellectual. That's the schools, mind you. The survivor of the intellectuals. You know, the intellectual, will the intellectual survive the trauma? Will he perform for us? The performance is the value. So fighting corruption in Africa, case for an African Association of Anti-Corruption Atrocities. Authorities, and we can dialect that Freudian slip, is the question of whether or not you do the crime, you do the time is rational. And, you know, Erasmus and his good friend Rabelais managed to squeeze through the Inquisition era of the book burners in the medieval era, when all was conceived of to be a performance for the church. And how safe you're going to go when there's persecution going on. Some guys didn't, you know, perform right for the papists. For the papal medieval, not the papists, but we can dialectical on that one. You know, but they didn't perform right for the joy division, so to speak. The people of Christian morality, they didn't perform right, and so they get the axe. The nail stuck up too high, so it got hammered down in Dealey Plaza. And so what we're dealing with is this sadistic tendency to say you are answerable to the Pope of poison crimes. You know, and one of the things that they sent Pentagon Disney, Germany and Pentagon Disney went to Africa. I mean, it's right across the strait. I mean, it's not hard to get there. And they wow the spiritualists with Pentagon Disney stuff from Lucas Studios. And our visiting scholars go there and go, wow, there's magic going on here. Africa is so dynamic. And they come in during the AIDS attack and tell us they're going to practice shamanism for Yoko Ono and start bombing things to the fiddle-dee-dee of Midori Goto. And they say, thou shalt never say that you have the right to civil rights, because then you don't understand and you will get poisoned in the mouth. So Stage seduction was what they were up to from the Rockefeller people. And he was actually there in Dealey Plaza. And the real message, all this Mysterianism, came out in 1964 on the wings of our desire to have JFK back. And they sent in the highly illogical one to team up with Martin Luther King for the whipping post of liberal ideas to the effect that we live in a democracy. Because it's not a democracy when the honchos in Seattle say, you better stop talking about us or you get poison in the mouth.